this is not a distraction from the Jake Tapper and Alex Thompson book you'll be previewing tomorrow. This is related to it. So we know two things. Obviously, I'm not a doctor, but I just heard one. I've also had a family member who's gone through prostate cancer. We know two things. One is that the transition from not knowing that he had prostate cancer to the description of the cancer that was put out yesterday is just too short not to raise flags. I mean, prostate cancer, thankfully, is detectable, especially in older men. And we, in America, especially look for it in older men really relentlessly. It's thankfully not too fast a cancer. There is time. Those PSAs develop over time. You don't start at a Gleason score of 9. And I personally find it quite difficult to imagine that someone with the medical resources that the President of the United States has at his disposal would not have had some signs before it had reached this stage. That's the first thing. And then when you combine that with the fact that they've been lying and lying and lying and going after anyone who has asked questions, I think it's a totally fair topic for public debate. And the lies that they told were not minimal. I mean, for example, one of the things that came out, and I think is in the Tapper and Thompson book, is that Biden's aides had discussed between themselves the possibility that he would have to be in a wheelchair in a second term. They had become fully aware of the fact that he didn't know the names of his cabinet or his friends, or even George Clooney, one of the most famous men in the world. These aren't minor deceptions. So it is not beyond the realms of possibility that they hid this. Now, I don't know, obviously, any more than anyone else does, but I think it is totally reasonable for a public that is in the midst of finding out one of the worst political cover-ups in American history to say, okay, and were you lying about that too? And to ask further questions.
And hopefully Tapper and Thompson will forgive me if this is... I'm trying to separate what I've read from the excerpts that have been intentionally released from what I've read and is in my head and is embargoed until tomorrow. But I feel like this one's out there. On that front, Rich, they told us that the reason he had like a strange gait and he wasn't walking normally was because he refused to wear his boot from when he had hurt his foot. A couple years earlier. He was like this bold, like Kennedy type of athlete who's like, screw the boot. I'm not, I'm out there. I'm the president. So he didn't follow doctor's orders, and that's why he was limping along. And in the book, they report the truth, which is he had degenerative spine issues that were severe, that were probably going to put him in a wheelchair soon. And they just wouldn't tell us. They lied. I mean, the point being, they deserve no benefit of the doubt. I'm sorry. Correct. I realize this is grave news. Like Charlie, I hope the president recovers. I realize it doesn't seem very likely, but I don't let my politics, they don't cause me to root for the man's death. But they do not deserve the benefit of the doubt on this statement.
Correct. And it was obvious. We saw it. I literally held my breath every time he walked up and down those Air Force One steps. And eventually they went to smaller steps, but they're still dangerous for someone in that condition. I remember I was on the set for my sins of NBC at some point, and off air, I said to a prominent Democrat who's still prominent on MSNBC, I think he could die. I think he could die on the steps of Air Force One. And this person said, yep, you're absolutely right. But never gave any indication on air that this person believed that, right? So all this, I agree with you, the Tapper book, is even if you're annoyed with Jake Tapper, and CNN was part of the cover-up, it's still extremely important. The details are telling. But I would say all this is shocking, but not surprising. If you told me a year ago that Democrats lost because either Biden ran again or got out too late, and then you told me that after that, he became the most hated man in the country, and there are all these revelations about stuff that insiders did to cover it up and things they knew about how really debilitated he was, and that there was a diagnosis of real serious cancer, kind of a snap diagnosis, dropped on us shortly after he left office. I would have said, of course, yeah. all that's happening and all that is going to happen. And sure enough, it has come to pass.
Because it seems very likely that he knew he had cancer, he was running for re-election, and that they understood they would just pass the baton to Kamala and she'd be in a way that she never could be on her own, because even Joe Biden, according to the reports, knew she was politically talentless. So this would have been a great way of stopping Orange Man bad, holding on to power, and installing their chosen puppet to take over the reins as president, while getting credit for having the first female woman of color president. Yay, go Democrats. So that makes perfect sense to me. That sounds exactly like them, as opposed to, we just didn't check a 78 to 82-year-old man's prostate for any of the 4 years he was president. And whoops, just fell victim to bad luck, Charlie, that he's one of like the only men ever to go from 0 to metastatic bone cancer in a period of 12 months or less.
Yeah, and I think, Rich said there are two options here, and I agree. I've said that myself this morning. But in a sense, they are related, in that if it is the case that in the course of his many medical exams, which I assume, given his history, he's had brain surgery, he's had skin cancer, I believe, he's 82,
Yep,
would have been more intense than, say, my annual checkups, which I still get, and everyone should go and get. If in the course of all of that medical attention that as the president of the United States he was receiving, this was not caught, then it seems unlikely that that was unrelated to the ongoing cover-up. By which I mean that that in and of itself was a choice.
Yeah,
because
we don't want to know.
Yeah, I have family members who have had this, and they live in England, and the healthcare that they get is not as good as the average American gets, because the National Health Service is not especially good, and it is certainly not as good as the President of the United States gets. I don't mean this to disparage them. They're my family and I love them, but they are not famous. They are not in high-profile jobs. They have had their conditions discovered in the course of the normal annual checkup that you give to men in their 70s and their 80s. So if it was the case that this wasn't found, this genuinely was not found, then I have to conclude that it wasn't looked for, and that this was part of an ongoing attempt to, what's that word, plausible deniability, to give us little information about the state of the president as possible, on the understanding that he was not in good shape.
Yeah, I don't believe that they just chose not to test because,
right, nor do I.
It's just, he's too important a person. There's just a human instinct to want to stay alive. I don't know. Jill Biden seems like a ghoul to me. I have to be honest. Maybe she was behind the scenes like, don't test. It's a need to know, and we don't need to know. But people are pointing out online, Rich, Biden himself in July of 2022 did say, I have cancer. And it perked up the ears of many of us, like, what? But he was so daffy so often. Right. It was hard to know, right. Like, is this a daffy moment? Or did he just actually slip and tell us something? Here's the soundbite, July 20, 2022, South 3.
I just lived up the road. In an apartment complex when we moved to Delaware. And because it was a 4-lane highway that was accessible, my mother drove us, and rather than us be able to walk. And guess what? The first frost, you know what was happening. You had to put on your windshield wipers to get literally the oil slick off the window. That's why I and so damn many other people I grew up have cancer.
It's really crazy to hear it now because, to be honest, he's clear in that phrase. Like, that's why I and so many other people I know have cancer. Like, he did it. He the pronoun, the comma, the additional clause, picking back up the thought. And actually, a lot of people were commenting on that clip at the time, questioning whether the story itself is true about like the frost was so full of oil. Like, what? No, it wasn't. Right. But there was an admission there it's pretty stark in retrospect, no?
I mean, it's so hard to tell with him, right? Whether he's making something up, whether he's confused, whether it's just poor syntax, whether it's his natural tendency to exaggerate and put himself into situations that he's not.
Yeah.
The worst example of this is
another distinct possibility.
Meeting with Gold Star families and say, same thing happened to me when it didn't. With Bo. So you just don't know.
This July, speaking of resets, there's a global summit of BRICS nations in Rio. This bloc of emerging superpowers, including China, Russia, India, and Iran, are meeting with the goal of displacing the U.S. dollar as the global currency. They're calling this the Rio Reset. As BRICS nations push forward with their plans, some worry global demand for U.S. dollars will decrease, bringing down the value of dollars in your savings. While this transition will not happen overnight, the Rio Reset could mark a pivotal moment. So learn if diversifying your savings into gold is right for you. Birch Gold Group can help you move your hard-earned savings into a tax-sheltered IRA in precious metals. Claim your free info kit on gold by texting MK to the number 989898. With an A-plus rating with the Better Business Bureau and tens of thousands of happy customers, let Birch Gold arm you with a free, no-obligation info kit on owning gold before July and the Rio Reset. Text MK to 989898 today. Thanks so much for watching. If you like what you just saw, hit the subscribe button for more clips and full episodes.